All right, welcome everybody. We're super excited um, for, I guess I should say, it sounds kind of bad when I'm like, we're super excited about tonight's call where I'm presenting. But I'm really excited about tonight's call because it's a topic that I'm super passionate about. And so the topic for tonight's call is overcoming fear to launch into action. And I feel like this is something that applies to so many aspects of life. I mean, obviously, this will help you in your doTERRA business, but it also will help you with any goal you're trying to achieve. It will help you with just all parts of life, really, because progression in life really has to do with getting outside our comfort zone and, moving through stuck emotion and limiting beliefs. And so that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about how we can overcome those fears and launch into action, whatever that action might be. So before I get started, I want to just kind of make one quick point about fear, and that is that fear is something that can be innate, it can be something that we're born with. So it can be like it can be, like I don't know if I ever necessarily had a reason that I became scared of heights, but I just am scared of heights, right? Like, and we're not going to necessarily talk about those types of fears today. We're going to be talking about more irrational fears. But um, regardless, some of our fears we could be born with, but most of them are triggered by some sort of stimulus, like stimuli, whether that's real or perceived. It doesn't even matter whether we were actually in danger or whether someone was actually yelling at us or we just felt like they were yelling at us, right? Like because it's all based off of our own personal perception. And then that's where our brain is like, this is a feeling I don't like. Therefore, it's dangerous. Therefore, I need to attach a feeling to that so that we don't get ourselves in this situation again because our brains are self-preserving, right? Our brain's job is to keep us safe. But the problem is nowadays, it's not like we aren't really in dangerous situations unless you're a super thrill seeker. You're not really in dangerous situations that often. What we are in is uncomfortable situations. And so what happens is we're in uncomfortable situations, or it could be even traumatic. It could be any type of thing, but your brain is like, oh, this is dangerous. It, creates this fear connection. And then the next time you go to try to do something similar, all the alarms and everything start going off. And depending on how you react to that, some of us, flee, some of us freeze. There's all different kinds of reactions we can have to fear. But all of those things are going to set in. So what we want to do is we want to figure out what the fear is, and then we want to rewire our brain. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight, is how we can identify the fear and then create a new connection to kind of correct those misconceptions that we have. So I'm not a Star Wars fan, but I found this quote and I really, it was like perfect. It says, named must your fear be, before banish it you can. And so we're going to start out with that. We're going to start out with naming your fear so that you can banish it. Okay. So I'm going to ask you, I'm going to read off some sentences for you. And I want you to write them down on a piece of paper. So grab a piece of paper and a pencil if you don't already have one. And I want you to just write, I'm going to go quick. So I just want you to literally write, there's no right or wrong here. The idea behind this is that we're kind of trying to like tap into the subconscious. And so I want you to write the very first thing that pops into your mind. Don't try to like analyze it right now. Just write what comes into your mind. Okay. All right. The first one is recruiting is blank. And this awkward silence right here while you write, I feel like I should give you examples. But if I give you examples, it ruins the activity. So I'm just going to give you a little minute of awkward silence and then we will move on. So recruiting is blank. Selling is people with money are successful people are I don't deserve network marketing is technology is I am not blank enough. I can't people are I always I can my business is I never okay. The last question might take a little bit more, but I want you to think about this question. So the question is, when do you feel resistance? Okay. So I want you to think about like your regular business activities, or if you're just maybe in general, like if someone asks you to do something in your church calling or in your at work, maybe you have a 9 to 5. I want you to think about times when you feel resistance. And resistance could look like you're nervous, but you do it anyways. It could look like you know you need to do this activity, but suddenly cleaning the house seems like a really good option, right? Like avoidance, like we're like, oh, I've been needing to clean the house, so I'm being productive. Like this is urgent when actually you should be doing this other thing, right? Or what is the thing that you find yourself always procrastinating? Okay, it could be any number of things and it's different for everybody, but I want you to just kind of like jot down a few things that you feel like you are, you know, thinking about, like some things that you feel like you come up against resistance for. So as you're finishing that up, obviously the object of this is that hopefully as you're writing out some of these sentences, you might get a glimpse at some of your limiting beliefs, and sometimes you might not, right? Like it kind of depends on how big your fears are, how strong your limiting beliefs are. If you've been doing a lot of limiting belief work, then you might have moved through some of these really simple, I say simple, they're not really simple, but you might have worked through some of these things. But there's probably a good chance that if you really reflect on some of these questions, I mean, you could answer these questions more than one way, right? Like I could say I'm not blank enough, and I could probably put that in, you know, a couple different spots, or I am, and I could finish that with a few different things. So if you can't see clearly right now, don't stress about it. Just start looking at it and then really look at those activities or things that you find yourself resisting, because that's going to be a huge flag. Anytime you find yourself resisting, that's your brain or your body's way of saying like, hey, I don't like this. We don't like this. And then it's our job to figure out if that's legitimate, if that's really like, oh, because I'm going to be going into a dangerous space, I need to protect myself, or I need to create boundaries to keep myself safe. Or is it just like, this is happening. And because what happens is fear does not protect us, it prevents us. Really, so much of the time when we have fear, it's not really protecting us from anything, it's preventing us from accomplishing things. And so I'm going to do a screen share for this next little part. And just because I'm a visual person and I like to be able to see what's happening. Oh, I thought if you want a picture of these questions to refer back to, here's your opportunity. Take a picture. Okay. So just like when you are sick with something, so let's say that I'm getting headaches and I can just keep taking a Tylenol to mask the headache, but ultimately, usually that headache's being caused because of something else, right? And so if I want to get to the bottom of the headache, I need to figure out what the root cause is of the headache, right? Not just treat this, like put a Band-Aid on it. I need to get down here to figure out how to really help myself. Well, fear is the same way. And so I could say I have, like if we just did this little activity, maybe one of the things that I feel like where I resist is when I have to call people, which is true. I actually dislike making phone calls. And I'm fine in person. I'm fine through text. I'm fine through Marco Polo. But when it comes to actually like having a phone call with somebody, I have a lot of resistance there. So I could say, I have a fear of talking on the phone. Well, I really don't, right? Like, obviously, I don't have a fear of talking on the phone. I have a fear of something else that's showing up when I talk on the phone for some reason, right? So what we want to do is we want to take those fears and when you're looking through your list of things, your kind of your belief statements that we just did, or where you're having resistance, you might find that like multiple fears are coming up. Like you're like, oh, well, this is a fear of, because we're going to talk about some common ones. Like, oh, this looks like fear. I think this is fear of failure. And oh, but this one is like fear of success. It's okay if you have multiples. I would say most people, when they're getting started in this type of activity, we're all gonna have like multiple different fears and false beliefs or limiting beliefs that are going to show up. So if that's the case, don't be overwhelmed by it. Just write them all out and then number them. Like which one is holding you back the most? Which one is having the biggest effect on you? And put a little star by that one. Start with that one, because we can really only work through them kind of one at a time. So start with that one. Once you feel like you got a handle on that one, then move to the next one and the next one. Because what happens is you figure one out, you work that through, and inevitably as you grow and progress, other things are going to pop up. Like right that now, like this last like 6 months, I've been going through a whole new fear that I'll probably talk about here in a minute. But this is a whole new thing that didn't even know I had a fear of, right? It just surfaced as I've been growing. So here are some popular ones that I put on here. I'm not going to take the time to explain them. If you feel like you need more understanding of how to figure it out, feel free to reach out to me. If you don't have my number, I'm going to put my my contact information towards the end of the presentation, so you can reach out and I'd love to chat with you about it. But fear of failure, fear of success, which at first I was like, that's weird. Why would anybody be fearful of success? But there are all different sides. I mean, success has obviously a lot of good sides, but generally there are downsides to it too. And some people get very afraid of that. The fear of other people's opinions. The one I'm dealing with right now is the fear of, it's like I fear change, but that's kind of like the surface level. And if I go like deeper, what I really fear is uncertainty. Like I fear not having a plan, not knowing what to expect. That's a fear of mine. Another thing to look at and that you can work through pretty similarly is our false beliefs. Because when you think about a false belief, most false beliefs are created as a like protection, or that's part of that mechanism, that fear protection, where our brain's like, oh, I'm going to create this belief to keep me safe, even though it's not true. We think it's true. And so that could be things like money blocks, like I can't make more than this, or I'm never going to have money, or money is the root of all evil, or right, like there is a lot of different money blocks that we could have. The feeling of like, I don't have any time. I don't have any time. Well, everyone's busy, and I'm sure, some people it's easier to find time than others depending on our life and our circumstances, but we all have time. It's just a matter of how we choose to use it, right? So that could be, these are all like scarcity versus abundance, right? Like we want to have abundant thinking, but scarcity thinking is really, really common. I don't know anyone. I don't know enough. I don't have enough knowledge or education. Okay, so these are some of the things that you might find that hopefully that will help you to come up with figuring out what some of your fears are. And like I said, now that hopefully by the end of the call or within the next couple of days, you can spend some time and really figure out what your fear is so that we can utilize these next steps and get to the bottom of them. So now I'm going to give you 5 tips to overcoming fear. And I love this first one because it's so simple, but I mean, honestly, sometimes it can be the hardest one to do because so what we know is inactivity breeds fear. So when you have a thought like, I need to call this person, the longer I sit and don't do it, the more fear builds up. But if I have a thought like, I need to call her, and I just pick up the phone and I do it, there's less chance for that fear to creep in. Okay. And a big part about this, so I mean, yes, it is take action quick. That's always like, if you have a feeling that you need to do something, like just do it. If you can just do it, do it. But the other side of this is sometimes we just have to take action even though we're scared, even though we have fear. I think a big misconception is we need to wait until we don't feel fear anymore before we can take action or do that thing. And if that's the case, we're never going to move forward. So I love this quote, and I actually left off I don't remember who said it, but I love the concept behind it, which is fearless is an empty word. It means that we're doing things that don't scare us. Brave is when, despite fear, we have the courage to take action. So that's what we want. We want to be brave. We want to take action. And like I said, maybe that action is as simple as doing an action, or maybe that action is doing some of the, the next 4 steps that I'm going to teach you tonight that you can utilize to help. All right, so the second one is embracing your fear. When I talk about embracing the fear, I think sometimes we think if I ignore the fear, if I just like push through it. So this is like, there's that good part about taking action and doing it. The bad side to that is sometimes we have this feeling that we just need to like do it and like force ourselves, even though it's terrible. And it's like the difference between if you have to walk a mile on the sidewalk or you have to walk a mile in the mud, and you're not going to be able to go nearly as far if you're walking through the mud with a backpack on as if you're just walking down the sidewalk by yourself, right? Like, so we want to make things easier for ourselves. And so that's what these tools that I'm about to share are, because we don't want to just force ourselves to like push through all the time. I mean, if it's something small and that's like a healthy thing, then great. But there are going to definitely be times where that's not the case. And so what we need to do is just take a minute to really sit with our fear and explore it, understand it, so that then we can take control of our fear instead of our fear taking control of us. So, I'm actually change. So this is a 4-step process that I have used over and over and over again in my life. I am a pretty fearful person. Like I actually lived for a long time thinking I had like all these fears, and I'm like the scaredy cat and I don't ever take risks. And then later, like as I was growing and doing some, personal work, I realized that it's just all like your perspective, right? Like some things scare me, public speaking doesn't scare me, and that scares a lot of people, right? Like it just kind of depends. Excuse me. But regardless, I've had enough things that I've had to work through that I can testify that this really has helped me, and I've seen it help a lot of other people. I've seen it help my kids. So anyway, I feel like you can utilize this for a lot of different things. So we're going to kind of work through it together. So I want you to pick one thing. First of all, like, do you guys feel like, maybe put it in the comments, do you feel like you've been able to identify a fear that you have? I'm not going to force anyone to share unless they absolutely want to. But just let me know, like in the chat or like a thumbs up, if you feel like you've been able to identify. Perfect. Katie's got hers. All right. So what we're going to do is I want you to think of that fear. So figure out what that fear is, and I want you to keep that in mind as we go through this process, okay? And then, like I said, you just keep doing this process over and over again with whatever different fear it is. So the first thing we want to do is we want to remember, we want to go back into our memory and think of the very first time that you felt this fear. Okay? So like the best case scenario, you go all the way back to childhood. Did you know that if you have a memory from childhood, it means that that event impacted you? That's where like memories come from. Our memories are formed based off of experiences that impact us, and that could be impacted you for good or impacted you for bad. But all of our memories impacted us in some way, and that's why we have them. Which seems weird because some memories seem so random, but there was some kind of impact. So I want you to think about that and go back to as far back as you can. If you can think of multiple times where you felt this fear. So like for me, when I went through this the first time, it was the fear of disappointing, the fear of like disappointing people. So I guess you could call it like the fear of what other people think, or just mainly the fear of disappointing my loved ones. That was a huge fear for me, that like, if you're a people pleaser, you can probably relate to that. So I had to go back like to when I was a little girl, and when I would feel like I was disappointing people, like specifically my parents, right? And I would think of specific times and examples, and then it really explore that. Okay. We're not going to be able to do all this tonight. So I want you to just like understand this question. And then that's like a great thing to journal or talk to a friend or a spouse about it, and really reflect on those situations so that you feel like you are like opening your mind up to them. Then you need to decide how that belief has served you in the past. Now this might seem weird because you're like, how would a fear like serve me? Or even if it was, because the same activity works for like a limiting belief. If I have a false belief about something, we have to figure out the reason that we have that is because at some point, like I said, our brain created it as preservation. So would you guys be willing to like work through this with us? Katie or Lauren, would either of you be willing to work through how your mind is trying to protect yourself? How did it help you? So I'll give an example, and then you can tell me if you're willing to share. So one of mine was, if I go back to mine, which was the fear of disappointing people. And I think, how did this belief serve me in the past? Well, in the past, as a child growing up, or even like as a young adult, I didn't get into trouble much. I was a rule follower. I was not a rule breaker. And so it kept me safe because it kept me out of trouble, right? Like it kept me, doing what people wanted and getting approval. I was a good student. I was right, like, because I was constantly striving to make sure that everybody was happy with me. And so that it did serve me, right? Like that served me. And I can see why my brain was like, hey, this is a belief. This is, we don't ever want to disappoint anyone. But now in my current sense, okay, so then we start exploring that, we explore it, and then we're going to make the connection to the future. So and I almost got ahead of myself, but let's see. So do you guys, will either of you, Katie, would you be willing to explore your fears? So Katie she said that for her is her fear is a fear of rejection. If you even want to just like unmute yourself, Katie, and we can kind of just chat about it for a second if you're open to that. Or Lauren, are you there? Or not. That's fine too. It is a kind of personal thing. So,
Does that make sense?
Oh, sorry. Oh, Katie.
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, it's echoing now. Hold on, let me see if I can figure out why it's echoing. Oh, I think it stopped. Okay, sorry, Katie. I was just saying, would you be willing to walk us through, like, so figuring out how your false belief has served you as far as like your fear of rejection?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of like I think it's kind of a combination. It's like fear of being rejected by people, but also like them getting mad at me or like feeling like I'm trying to push stuff on them. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
But so for me, like rejection, it was kind of like in a sense it kept me safe because if I didn't like try and put myself out there, then nobody would reject me and I'd have friends and everything would be great and I wouldn't be getting negative feelings and I wouldn't have my feelings hurt or I wouldn't feel bad about myself if somebody didn't want to do what I was doing or didn't want to, come along with me on some, on a journey or whatever. So and it kind of, I think, stems back also to me being a people pleaser where I just want everybody to be happy. And if that means me going along with their idea versus coming along with me, then I'll go with them.
Yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate you sharing, and that's kind of ironic because Lauren put a fear of others not wanting to join me, and you put a fear of rejection, but then as you described it, it had a lot to do with your fear of not wanting people to, join you, right? So it sounds like kind of even like in that situation, like look at that. They're like you are both having very similar fears that are a little bit like multi-dimensional, right? Like the fear of rejection or the fear of not wanting other people and not worrying that someone's not going to want to come with you or that, or that they're not going to, like you said, you're protecting yourself. And that's what your brain's doing. So so just to kind of recap, so the way we look at that is so that this served me because then I didn't have to have bad feeling, like, right, I didn't have to deal with my hurt feelings, as like you mentioned, like I don't have to deal with those hurt feelings. Well, that sounds like a good plan, right? Especially for like little girl Katie, little girl Lauren. That makes a lot of sense. But now as we start to transition, so again, we're going to explore that. We're going to spend a little bit of time thinking about all the different ways that that served us before and why our brain started making that plan. And then we're going to shift and we're going to start thinking about, but what about now? And what about in the future? Okay. Because right now I can see that, like this fear of uncertainty, like I don't really feel like it's serving me anymore, right? Like when it's just like weighing heavy and I feel like it's holding me back and I want to push through it. And so at this point I have to sit and I have to think, okay, what does my future look like if I hold on to this belief? If I hold on to this fear, what is my future going to look like? And the more clear you can be with this activity, the better it is. So like I want you, like, you would like close your eyes and you would visualize your, like, actually like in your mind's eye, see what it looks like. What does it smell like? What does it feel like? Where are you at? Like try to engage all of your senses and really hold on to like what does your future look like? And I mean, if you can get yourself to like move to tears, even even better. I know that sounds like why would I want to make myself cry? And usually we try to avoid those icky feelings, but legitimately, if you can really help yourself to say like yeah, this is terrible. I absolutely don't want this. Then we're going to follow it up with, okay, but what does my future look like if I'm able to change this? If I'm able to completely, like, if somebody could wave a magic wand and I could completely be free from my fear of uncertainty, then what does my life look like? And explore that in that same detail, in that same depth. And what we're trying to do here is just, we're trying to, like, that neural connection, we're just trying to help our brain figure that out. So again, explore it, write it down, have a conversation with somebody about it, whether it's a mentor or your friend or your spouse or your kids. Talk to somebody about it, because the more real you make that, the more effective it's going to be for helping you work through your fear. And then the last thing is, we have to start looking for connections and drawing connections and then noting it to our brain. Okay, like we're going to be like, hey, brain, look at this. Really, it sounds ridiculous, but it is so effective. So, what we're going to do is we're going to look for examples of both of those scenarios. So, somebody who has the fear and then somebody who doesn't have the fear, right? We're going to look for those outside of ourselves. So we could see those in our family members, in our friends, in our neighbors, in our coworkers, in movies, in television shows. We're going to look and I'm going to be like, "Oh, yeah, I see that this person has a fear of uncertainty and they're just like apprehensive about life, and I see that they're not going anywhere, they're not doing anything, and I need to be like, okay, look at this person, and like make a mental declaration, and then watch and observe that, so that your brain is like, oh yeah, I see it. And then on the other hand, I'm going to look at somebody. So like for me, for example, the Rigby's, some of you know the Rigby's and some of you don't. The Rigby's are like 10 years older than me. And so I love it because they're 10 years older than me and they're living the life that I want to live, right? Like they have a very similar lifestyle that I want to live. They have 4 kids. And so I watch them and I see that life has thrown them curveballs, and they're still having all of these different things happen, but they're not letting uncertainty hold them back from happiness, right? And I can see that they're just like, because I know them and I watch them, and I see it and I'm like, okay, that is what I want to be. And I'm going to remind my brain of it over and over and over again. And when I get in those moments of fear, I think there's no reason to worry because I want to be like this. And so we're really just rewriting our fears. We're changing the scenario. Okay. So this is the first activity. It's like this 4-step process. Take a screenshot of the questions, use it over and over and over again. Any questions on this part? Okay, perfect. All right, the next thing is change your perspective. So words are very powerful, right? We know words are powerful, and this is something that I feel like has been really helpful for me and just like everyday life with my anxiety and all things related to that. Because if you're an anxious person, you are naturally going to be a more fearful person, right? Like it just is like, it goes together, because anxiousness equates so often to worry. And so if you're anxious and you're a worrier, you're going to be apprehensive about all these different things. And so life, just simple activities within life, become so overwhelming. So what we have to do is become aware of our language. And when we need to remember that when we use what if language, it's fear talk. When we can switch that to even if, then it's faith talk, right? Like it's faith language. And so we need to become really aware of how we talk to ourselves, how we talk to each other, and how we talk to God. If you're a God believer, even the way you talk to God. So I will share, when about like a year and a half ago, we like pray in our family and we take turns. And my husband noticed that when I would say my prayers, I would say, please bless us that we might have a good day. Please bless us that we might get better, or whatever it was, like whatever thing. And I would just, that we might, that we might, that we might. And one day he called me on it and he was like, why don't you have more confidence in your prayers? Like, why don't you say, bless me that I will? Can you feel the difference when I say, bless me that I will be safe? Bless me that I might be safe, right? I was showing a lack of faith and this fear language, this doubt, even when I was praying to God. Okay. And so we need to really, and it's still, I find that I'm totally aware of it now. And every once in a while, I still catch myself doing it. It's a hard habit to break. And so, but when you find yourself stuck in that what if scenario and that fear language, one thing that you can do to help is make a worst case scenario plan. So this is something I do with my kids all the time. It's something that I do with myself. And even like my husband will help me with it. It's like if I'm really fearful about something, or I'm worried about something, then I'll be like, okay, what is the worst thing that could happen? And we like explore that. And then once I know what that is, then I'm like, okay, so what would I do if the worst thing happened? Right. And usually it's something like, well, if, worst case scenario, like, I don't know, worst case scenario, I lose this friend, or worst case scenario, I lose a customer. Well, then they probably weren't really that interested in the first place, or they weren't that good of a friend in the first place, or I could apologize, or right, like you get it. You make a plan. And then once you have the worst case scenario plan, you always have to follow it up with, but what if, right? What if it does work? Okay. So in this scenario, we're taking that fear talk and we're kind of like flipping it. So we're like, but what if, because if you're in that negative space of planning for the worst scenario, if you flip it and you're like, but what if it goes well? Like, what if it's a good thing and everything is perfect and I'm blessed because of it, right? So always end on a good note. And then just try to remember, even if, so then you basically have your even if, right? Like once you've done that activity, it's like, even if I lose a customer, it's okay because, right? Now we have this new language. Um, the next thing is to recognize that fear and excitement physically show up in our body in a very similar way. So whether when you're like super excited about something, your heart can race, you can get butterflies in your stomach, you're like kind of like hyped up. And when you feel fear, you have your heart racing and you feel butterflies in your stomach and you're like, you have this same like jitter, but sometimes it's like, oh, instead of right? Like it's just the difference is like just slight. And so sometimes you can recondition your mind and just be like, I'm so nervous to give this presentation, or I'm so excited to give this presentation. And it's kind of like that concept of like fake it till you make it, right? Like just kind of keep telling yourself, I'm so excited, I want to throw up. You know what I mean? But that's again, it's kind of still it's a shift in perspective that can get you through, and you'd be surprised sometimes your brain buys into it. Um, the last thing I want to talk about here is confidence letters. So, a confidence letter is something that you do when you're in a good space. When you are feeling pretty good about yourself, you have this written beforehand, and it's kind of like a letter of recommendation that you write to yourself. You basically write down every good thing that you can think of that you've ever done, like any accomplishment that you're proud of, any skills that you feel like you're good at. You write down just all the goodness about you. Then you save it for moments where you don't feel great about yourself. And I feel like it's even better if you get input from some other people. Like put a post on your social media that's like, hey, what are 3 words you would use to describe me? I'm doing an activity. What are 3 words you would use to describe me? And then take a poll and figure out what the most popular words are and write that in your people. Describe me as loving, genuine, and kind, right? Or whatever. Or ask your spouse or your parents or a friend if they'll write you a letter, a confidence letter or a letter of recommendation just for yourself to keep for a rough day. So I have some stuff that is kind of like that for my birthday a couple years ago. Andy did like affirmations for me I love languages, words of affirmation. And so he got like all these nice comments from all my friends and family, and he wrote them on sticky notes and he stuck them all over the door. And I kept every single one. And when I'm having a hard time, I will literally pull them out and I just like page after page and I just read them. And it makes you feel so much better. So the other thing I want to do, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more in a minute, is write out your inspired thoughts in the moment that you receive the inspiration. I'm going to circle back around this to the end, but don't trust that you're going to remember. Take the time. It doesn't have to be long, but take the time to write down your inspired thoughts when you have them. Okay. And like I said, we'll circle back around to this. The next step, step 4, is balance your fear with your desire and your belief. Okay. So the way that this activity works is you basically rate a couple of different things on a scale of 1 to 10. Okay. So you start with your fear. So you're like, I have a fear of whatever it is. I have a fear of rejection. On a scale of 1 to 10, how great is your fear? So 1 is I have no fear at all. 10 is a herd of wild horses couldn't drag me to do this, to overcome this fear of rejection. And for this activity, you might even break it down, and it might be like to make that phone call or to talk to this one person, right? Like you might break it down so that it's this activity, not even necessarily the full fear. So you're going to rate your fear on a scale of 1 to 10. I'm guessing that it's probably going to be above a 5 if you're going to take the time to do this activity. Oops, wrong way. Okay, so then what we're trying to do is we're trying to create this place where our motivation center is high enough that it's like, oh yeah, we've got this. Like we're feeling good. And yeah, that fear is still, this is where that action thing comes into play, right? Like even though I still have fear, the other part of my body is like, okay, I'm scared, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm scared, but I feel like if I keep doing it, it's going to get easier and the fear is going to get less and less and less, right? So that's what we're trying to create. So we're trying to, because when the fear is high, it's up at a 10, and then all these other things are, 7 or below, then we're going to stop. We're going to freeze. We're going to flee. But if we can get our fear down, maybe even a little bit, or even if it stays, and then we can get these other things that I'm going to talk about up above 6, 7, and they're solid up there, then our brain is going to be like, okay, we can go. Let's go do this. Even though we're scared, let's go do it. Okay. So the first one is pretty a conscious mind, and that is your focus. Like how clear is your focus on what you want to accomplish? So this is like, what is it you want to do? Right? Like, what is it? What do you want? The what has to be clear. Okay. And the second thing is your why. And I feel like sometimes we get confused and we try to make our what and our why the same thing. The what is like, what do you want? I want more money for my family, or I want time freedom. I need to like focus on, I want a founder's spot, or I want to be a specific rank. What is it exactly? Be very specific to know what you want, but your why is the driving force. Okay. So your why, so like for me, my what would be like, which this changes and evolves or whatever, but my what would be like, I want to be prepared for retirement so we can serve missions and not have to worry about anything at home, right? Like that's part of my what. My why would be because I want to help others feel God's love and understand their greatest potential. That's my why. I have it written on my wall. I keep it there every day so I can remember. Okay, so what is your why? And then rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. How strong is your why? Your why should move you to tears. If your why doesn't move you to tears, then work with me or someone else, your upline, your spouse, to get it deeper so that it does move you to tears. Again, we're trying to make you cry. Okay, the third one is belief in yourself. And or it might even, like, depending on what the goal is, it might be belief in someone else, or it could be belief in a couple of things. But generally we want to turn it so that we're setting these things for things we have control over. So I can. Do I have a belief that I can do it? Right? If I don't believe I can do it, then I need to do something to change that. If I don't know what my why is, I need to get clear on my why, right? So this is just helping us to know what we need to work on to strengthen these things so that we can now, because now we're moving over here into the subconscious area, it gets a little bit trickier. But if you're looking, you need ideas on how to strengthen these different sections, reach out and let's brainstorm it together. I love to do this kind of stuff. All right, the fourth one is I will. Like I am determined. I am determined to get this done. Like this is going to happen. Or like if I have time, I'll get around to it. Right? Like you have to be determined. And then the last one, I keep clicking the wrong thing, is how much do you feel like you deserve it? This one I feel like gets a lot of people. I am, it goes back to that statement that we finished, like I am worthy. I am deserving, right? Like how much do you feel like you deserve what it is you're going after? Okay. So we want to get all of those things for sure above 5, but like up in the 7 to 10 range is going to mean that you are really capable of overcoming that fear. So this is just another activity you can work through on your own. Again, you can take a screenshot if you want. But this is something that has helped me a lot in understanding my fears and working through them. All right, the last one is increasing your faith. So in my opinion, the opposite of fear is faith. If you have faith in something, you have an overwhelming faith in something, fear can really not show up. Like fear and faith, in my opinion, can't be present at the same time. And so, I mean, do all the other things, right? Like explore all those other things, but ultimately, I feel like this is a step that you can't skip. You have to be able to increase your faith. And depending on what your goal is, that could look like a few different things. So I want to explore these 3 things about how we can overcome our fear by increasing our faith. So the first thing I think is pretty simple, is just increase your faith in the product. Like if you have a fear of talking to people about Deep Blue, then you probably don't have enough faith in the product itself. So what can you do to increase your faith in the product? Well, probably use it, or talk to other people that have used it, or learn more about how it works and why it works, right? That's how you would increase your faith in the product. Maybe you don't have faith if one of your questions that you had to answer was network marketing is. Like, there are some people that when they think of that are going to be like, network marketing is sketchy. Network marketing is unliked, right? Like network marketing is a pyramid scheme or whatever, right? Like if those things come into your mind at all, then there's a chance that you aren't 100% comfortable with that. And if you're not 100% comfortable with it, then take the time to explore that, learn about the company, learn about why they chose the plan that they did, learn about how they came to be. All of those things will increase your faith in the company. It could be your team, it could be in your own abilities, right? So whatever it is, take that piece and increase your faith. The next thing is practice overcoming common objectives. I feel like, well, this kind of goes back to increasing your faith too. I feel like knowledge is power, even if the knowledge that you gain is that you don't know something. That's still powerful, because the moment that you realize that you don't know something, you suddenly have power to fix it. So whether it's increasing your faith in the product or whatever, or if you don't know how to, like you're nervous or you have a fear of an objection, like somebody is telling you like, oh, I don't like that product, or I don't have enough money, or whatever it is. It could be any number of things. There's tons of different rejections that could come up. Some are super common, but if you become confident in how to respond to that, and there's a lot of different tricks we could talk about with that too, that's for another day. But when you become confident in that, your faith is naturally going to increase. So doTERRA has, if you haven't seen it yet, doTERRA has what's called the sales guide. And like a couple page into that, they actually have a section on overcoming objections. And they're like super common ones that are like for doTERRA, that are like doTERRA specific. And I would highly recommend you check that out and read over them. I found that to be very helpful. Also, role playing, even though it's super uncomfortable and awkward, can be very effective when trying to gain confidence and faith on how you're going to react. Because if you're worried about rejection, then learning to be able to handle that in a effective, confident way is going to make a big difference. And then the last thing I want to talk about, in my opinion, is the most important, and that is to invite God into your business. Now, I understand that not everybody believes in God. And so if you don't believe in God, you can just take this off your list and be done for now. Like, just hop off the call now. That's totally fine. But this is something that I'm most passionate about. And so I'm going to take just the last bit of the call to talk about how we can invite God into our business. And I actually have a separate presentation that, as I was like preparing this presentation, I was preparing this other one like simultaneously, because I felt like so inspired to do this other class, but then I was like, there's no way, this is like way too much information. So if you're interested in learning more about how to invite God into your business, I'm going to share my like Instagram page, so you can message me on there, and let me know like, hey, I'd like to hop on your call, or I'd like the recording for your call. I'm going to do a call specifically on how to invite God into your business. Okay, so and it's like a 10-step process of how to do that. But today I'm just going to talk about the first step, which is understanding the principle of faith. Okay. And when we talk about faith, like right now specifically, we've talked about faith in the product, faith in yourself, faith in the business. Like, we talked about those aspects. But right now we're talking about inviting God into your business. And so we're talking specifically about faith in God, right? Like, we're going to talk about the principle of faith that can relate to other things. But for a lot of this, we're talking about faith that God knows you and he's going to bless you and all these things. Okay. So the first thing I want to mention is that faith is a moving cause of action. So I have this little paycheck here as an example, because if you didn't have faith that you were going to get a paycheck, you would never show up to work, right? Like, if you wouldn't go to work if you didn't have faith that your employer was going to pay you, because like, why would you? You wouldn't take the time to plant a garden if you didn't have faith that there were going to be vegetables, at the end of the season. Now, granted, sometimes there aren't vegetables. In my garden, there's not always vegetables. But I had faith that there would be, right? Like, I had faith. That's why I was willing to put in the work, because I had faith that there was going to have something was going to come from that. And so faith, just like we talked about in the beginning when we were talking about taking action and how inaction breeds fear, works breed faith, right? Sometimes you have to take a step into the darkness so that God can put ground beneath your feet. One of the times when Andy and I made some of the scariest decisions in our lives, we literally have this conversation. Like, we feel like we need to do this, but like, we just kept wanting like to know for sure. Like, we kept wanting to like be comfortable before we took the leap. But ultimately, we had to take action first, and then God was able to bless us, right? That happens so often. So I'm guessing a lot of you, if you're a believer of God, you've probably heard the scripture in James 2:14 that talks about faith without works. Okay. And I love this little image because it obviously is like a visual of this concept that when we combine faith with works, that's when like stuff gets done. That's when blessings are able to happen. So when we have faith with no works, I found this quote and I really like it because I feel like it applies to a lot of things. It says, this is from Yvonne Chouinard, I think is how you say her name. She's the founder of Patagonia. Okay. I think this is so insightful. She says, there's no difference between a pessimist who says, oh, it's hopeless, so don't bother doing anything, and an optimist who says, don't bother doing anything, it's going to turn out fine. Right? So it doesn't matter how you look at it. We have to do our part. We have to put in the work. And we also, on the flip side, have to have the faith that when we put in the work, it's going to happen. So there's a Instagram reel that went around, like it was like a couple months ago, and it spoke to my very being. And it was this lady, an actress, and she was giving the scenario about catching a bus. And she said, if I like run for the bus and I'm praying that, I'm praying like, hey, is that my bus? And I get on the bus, then great. But if I'm running for the bus and I don't pray, then that could be a problem. If I, oh no, I got myself mixed up. I should have just played the reel. This is going, I'm like, this is crashing and burning right now. This is a pivotal moment in my presentation and I just botched it. Anyway, the concept is, Lauren saw the reel. She could probably explain this better than me. But the concept is that if I run and I miss the bus, if I run and I pray and I miss the bus, it wasn't my bus. But if I run and I don't pray, maybe it was my bus and I just didn't pray. If I pray but I don't run, then I might miss the bus and it could have been my bus. But I have to have faith that if I pray and I run and I don't make it, then that wasn't the bus for me, right? So there's this concept that, again, I'll have to share with you all the reel because she says it like in 2 seconds because it's a reel, and and it was so good. But the concept is just faith without works is dead, but also works without faith doesn't really get us where we want to be either. Okay. So the last part is just kind of a personal thing that I struggled with for a really long time. And so I want to pose this question. Is it possible to exercise faith in God, to serve him, follow him, but not believe him? Okay, I want you to just kind of think about that. If you want to put it in the chat, you can. You can put your opinion in there. But I think it totally is possible. It totally is possible to have faith in God, to serve him, to follow him, and not to actually believe him. And I'm going to explain that a little bit farther. So in the New Testament, I wrote this little part down so I won't botch it like I did the other part just now. In the New Testament, because this is when we refer to a scripture story, there's a father and he asks Jesus to heal his child. Okay. And Jesus answers and says, if thou canst believe, all things are possible to him that believeth, right? Like that's Jesus's response to this man. And the father cries out, Lord, I believe. But then just like right after that, he says, help thou my unbelief. So I wonder if the man's request was not necessarily to believe who the Savior was, because he sought him out, right? Like he went looking for him to heal his son. So he already knew who Christ was. He obviously already had faith in his ability, or he wouldn't have gone seeking him in the first place. But I wonder if perhaps what he needed was help believing that the master's blessings could be so individual and so personalized that it could bless his very own son. He believed generally that it was possible, but not on a personal level, that it was like personally, specifically for him. And So I think that we often testify of what we know is true. But I think the more relevant question is, do we believe what we know? So this was something that was like totally hit for me, because I just felt like I was already so blessed. I was like, why would God want to give me more? Like, why would God want to give me more? Like, I just didn't think I needed more. Like, I was already had, a family that loved me, and I just was like, why? Like, I had a really hard time believing that. And the other thing I had a difficult time with was like this concept of like, if God has a plan for me, like if I make a plan, like what if it like if it's not in God's plan, it doesn't matter what my plan is because God's all powerful, right? Like I had this like conception of like I kind of didn't have an ability to like take control of my life or make goals for myself. Like I was a goal setter, but like it made me like scared or apprehensive to like dream big or expect more out of my life because I just thought like why? But the real question we need to ask is not like, why would he want to bless me? It's why would he not? Like, if you think about your own kid, and if your kid wanted something super bad, and if you don't have kids, then think about your parents or someone that you love, and they come to you and they're like, hey, there's this thing that I really, really want. And I've been spending time learning about it and studying it. And I have a plan, and I would love your help like perfecting this plan, but here's what I'd like to do in order to make this happen. And if it happens, this is what I'm going to do with it. This is how I'm going to be a steward over this, like whatever it is, XYZ. Would you ever say to them, like, sorry, no, like, I don't think you deserve that. I don't want you to be happy. Like, we would never say that to our kid. So why would God ever want to tell us that? Like he loves us more than we can even imagine. So why would he not want to bless us? um I have an experience, and I think this is hard because sometimes we think that that means that we always get what we want, but we don't always get what we want. So then like how does that play into this whole concept of like bringing God into our goals and into our businesses and the things that we want? So to end, I'm just going to share kind of a personal experience that I had. So I have been in doTERRA for like 12 years, and my journey has been amazing. Like there were some times when things were going way slower than I wanted it to go. Um, and then there were times where I felt like I had these like bursts of explosions. But regardless of all of that, doTERRA has been an incredible blessing to me and my family. But as I was getting to gold, and I was really wanting to get solid in the rank of diamond because it meant a significant increase in income, right? Which was important for our family. That was something that our family really needed. And it meant a lot of peace for me. And it meant that it was a lot of things, right? A lot of things. And so I utilize this 10-step principle that I'm going to share in this other class. But it starts with this principle of faith and believing that I can go to God and I can ask. And so I went to God with this desire that I had to hit diamond. And I asked him, like, is this within thy will? Like, is this part of thy will for me? Is this something that is good? Um, and then I have to have faith, right? I have to have faith that God will answer me. And he really did. He showed up in a way that was like crazy. Like the answers were crystal clear to me. Like words like the word diamond was like in my scriptures when I opened them up to read. Like it just randomly opened up my scriptures and it said diamond like 3 times. And then like I went to the temple, which is a place where we go to worship, and I saw the words diamond there. It was like the middle name of somebody I was doing the service for. And I was like, oh my heck. Like Like God was like, boom, like, hello, like I want this for you. This is part of your will. And so I went forward like I just knew. I had so much confidence and I just like went for it and it was fabulous. And I still had setbacks and it was hard, but it happened, right? Like it didn't happen in the timetable maybe I wanted it to happen, but it happened. And it was incredible. It was a testimony building experience for me. And what I wanted to come back to what here was that there were times when, because what happens when we have faith like this and we have these amazing testimony building experiences with, maybe for you God speaks to you, God speaks to everyone differently because it's a very personal thing, but when he speaks to you, like, and you get these inspirational nuggets, Satan is going to be there minutes later, right? And then he's going to throw hard things in your way and in your path. And as he does that, all he's wanting you to do is doubt that original answer you got. And it is so, so important that we remember that that first answer we got was always the right answer, right? Like that inspiration, that revelation that we received from God through the Holy Ghost or the Savior, however you believe it comes from, that was the truth. And we have to hold on to that. And so if we write it down, it makes it so much easier because then we don't forget all those little tiny things that sometimes just the little things that show up as a testimony, like here and there. So in those difficult moments when Satan is like pounding down the door to try to get to you, you're like, no, right? Doubt your doubts before you doubt your doubts before you doubt your faith, or whatever that saying is. I'm doing really good with the quotes today. But anyway, so that confidence letter is super important. And on the flip side of that, I had an equally strong feeling about Founders Club. Okay, so Founders Club is this new thing that came out a couple years ago. It was an amazing opportunity. And Andy and I talked about it. We prayed about it. We created a plan, and we consecrated like, hey, this is what we're going to do with this. Like, if we are able to earn this spot, like we'll consecrate all the money that we earn and give it back to you. Like we were literally willing to take all of that chunk of our paycheck and do only good for with it, only use it to help God's work. Like I don't know what more we could have done, right? Like that's, I don't know what more you could have done to show you like your seriousness for wanting to accomplish something. And then I had to go to work, right? And so when we did that, I had a good feeling. Andy and I had a good feeling. And I kept thinking, like, I kept wanting this like super like powerful, like magnificent like answer. And I never got it, but I did get a confirmation that it was right. Like I did get a confirmation that I needed to move forward. And I thought, okay, this is one of those situations where like I just have to take a step into the darkness because God's like, no, I want to see like what you're going to do. I'm not going to give you this like black and white answer this time. And so I took a step right into the darkness to see what would happen. And as I did that, I worked and I worked, and it took whatever, like Founders Club ends the end of August. And the way this story ends is I'm not getting a founder spot. Okay. So does that mean that the answer I originally got was wrong? This is the question I've been asking myself, and I've been like praying over and I've been stewing over for the last like 3 months, because I knew it was like the last, 2 months, 2.5 months, I knew it wasn't coming together. And so my question was, if I got the answer in the morning and I felt peace, which means like, yeah, if you don't feel uncomfortable, if you don't feel like bad about it, if you have a peaceful feeling, then you take action and you move towards it. Sometimes the answer is that it's not in the end result. Sometimes the answer is the lesson is in the journey. Sometimes the blessing is in the journey, not in the destination. And if I think about what I really wanted from Founders was an opportunity to serve God more fully, right? Like I really didn't want a founder spot. I wanted more ability to be able to serve God and show up for him. And I thought that Founders would help me to do that. And it would have. It would have helped me to do that. But here's what I want to say right now is that even now, right now in this moment, that feels like it could be really hard, and I could start doubting and saying, like, maybe that answer wasn't the right answer. Like, maybe it wasn't right. What really the situation is, and I can testify right now that what the situation is that I'm still going to get that. Like, I'm still going to have the ability to share God's message. I'm still going to be able to bless lives and help people to realize their greatest potential and to feel God's love, right? Like, I'm still going to be able to do that. And this journey that I've been on has helped me to learn so that I can come closer to being able to do that thing. And so we just have to understand that if the answer feels like no, sometimes it's about what we learn and understand on the way. And sometimes it means, like, I'm still going to get that same answer. It's just going to show up differently. And now, like, I get to embrace that uncertainty. Like, now I'm like, oh, like, I talked about my fear of uncertainty, and now I'm thinking, like, uncertainty is kind of exciting. Like, I can't wait to see how God blesses me to be able to serve him in the way that I want to, and to be able to magnify, because money magnifies, right? Like, if you're good and you have money, you can do more good. And so I'm like excited to be able to see how God is going to bless me and my family so we can help more, so we can do more good. And so I just want to challenge you guys to not let fear hold you back from stepping into your greatness. And don't let Satan win. Don't let him, let that doubt creep in. And just understand that no matter what the process looks like, you've got this. Like, you can do it. So that's my message. If you're interested in learning more and getting the whole, like, 10 steps of understanding the principles of inviting God into your business, you can find me on Instagram or Facebook. On Facebook, I'm Tiffany Gail Mosman. On Instagram, I'm Happy Mind Maker. Shoot me a message and let me know, and I will send you an invite. I don't have the day set yet, but it will be coming up here in the next little while. But if you miss it, because if you're watching this recorded afterwards, then I can send you the recorded version too. And if you have any questions or you just want to talk through stuff, please don't hesitate to reach out. I would love to talk with you and help however I can. So thanks so much.